Welcome to Conscious Insights, Strategies for Leadership Evolution. Engage in roundtable discussions that spark deep dialogue with executives and thought leaders to advance conscious leadership and explore innovative practices. Join us and gain insights that will elevate your leadership journey. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Conscious Insights. Another one that I'm particularly excited about. I think I'm excited about all of these because the subject is near and dear to my heart. But today we're talking with Cecily Sommers and Ashish Kothari about the future of flourishing, finding order in a disordered world. And I'm going to read a little bit about each of them, but I want to tell you why I think this conversation is so important. Is I saw Cecily speak, and Cecily is a futurist, and what she spoke about the world that we find ourselves in, and then knowing the work that Ashish does, and he and I do similar work, and trying to help people make sense of why this work is so important for where the world is going and where we're at. So it'll give a little more context when I read their bios and we jump in. But first, Cecily Sommers helps leaders anticipate and steward transformational change. Named one of the world's 50 leading female futurists by Forbes, Cecily embeds foresight and leadership development programs, training clients to become their own best futurists. As the strategist that Google, Salesforce, Purina, and JP Morgan Chase turn to make sense of their future, Cecily guides organizations through critical questions such as which opportunities give us the greatest advantage, and how do we develop change-ready leaders? A two-time TEDx speaker and frequent keynote presenter at conferences, Cecily has been described as catalytic and brilliant for making complex issues simple and relatable. Dedicated to advancing change literacy in organizations, she created the Lead Like a Futurist program as a certified transformational coach. Welcome, Cecily. And Ashish Kothari is an executive coach, author, consultant, and founder of Happiness Squad, a company focused on helping individuals and organizations make flourishing their competitive edge and operate at their fullest potential. Ashish is the author of the best-selling book, Hardwired for Happiness, in which he outlines an easy-to-follow recipe that can help anyone increase joy, health, love, and meaning in their lives. Prior to starting Happiness Squad, Ashish was a partner at the global management consulting firm McKinsey & Company and spent over 2 decades helping thousands of leaders and their organizations achieve breakthrough performance through increasing effectiveness and building more human-centric cultures. Ashish has an MBA from Chicago Booth and a bachelor's and master's degree in chemical engineering from the Indian Institute of Technology in Mumbai, India. And he is married and lives in Boulder, Colorado with his wife, Lizzie, his son, Ashwin, and their pug, Hufflepuff. So welcome both Ashish and Cecily. I'm so excited to have you here. You know, I mentioned earlier, Cecily, that I met you. I saw you. I don't know that I met you. I saw you speak in the fall of 2024, and I was mesmerized by what you were talking about, how you explained the order to disorder and what that means for people. It was just such beautiful context. I met Ashish, I don't know, a little over a year ago, and we were both speaking about the systemic change and why we work with individual leaders and people and how that contributes to a bigger change. And I immediately wanted to know Ashish, and we immediately became friends and colleagues. And so it's just really exciting to have you both here because I think we can combine like what's going on in the world, and then why in the heck would Ashish and people like me be doing the work that we're doing? Yes, we love it, but there's a bigger reason for it as well. So let's see. So let's get started. Cecily, when I say that I saw you speak and that you're a futurist and we talk about the disordered world, can you give some context for that?
Yeah, maybe the first thing I'll do is say thank you for having this conversation. It's just a
Absolutely.
pleasure, and I'm looking forward to the combination of what will happen as we thread Ashish's work and yours and mine together. And the people like to know, what is a futurist and what does that mean? And really, to be a futurist is to be a student of change. And so foresight looks at the structural forces of change that drive it. So kind of beneath the level of trends. And the thing that we do is take the futurist perspective, like for me, going all the way out into space, so that we can begin to see what are the common universal laws that guide change. And when we get out there, we do find a pattern that many of us know and use because it exists at every level of life. And that is, first of all, everything's cyclic. It goes through cycles of order, disorder, and reorder. Sometimes we refer to it as life, death, and rebirth. And that those cycles in each iteration expand and they form a spiral. So each time that we are going through another kind of birth, death, and rebirth, the hard work, really what is happening is we are being invited to expand our awareness, our skills, our hearts, our consciousness, usually through hard work and hard times. This spiral occurs through, again, every living system, including in societies. And so we experience it in the cycles of seasons and the year and in the chapters of our lives. But in a global society throughout history, we notice that every 80 to 100 years, there is a big restructuring of the global order. And we are exactly 80 years post World War II, where there was phenomenal restructuring after an incredibly destructive period, right? You know, the disorder of World War II was very wide stretching, and it allowed us to really build the rule of law, international structures that have held us and guided us and become a worldview and a philosophy that now is expiring through a number of forces, which you could name, I won't go into, but it does help us make sense of this moment of where we are and that we do see it around the world. And while people frequently say this is unprecedented, in history, it's not. It is unprecedented in our own lifetime for most of us. And it's incredibly frightening. And that the one thing we know for sure is that turbulence kind of rules the day for the transitional period between eras for several decades. And so, bringing it back to the focus of this conversation, one of the things that is useful to accept is that as the stability in the external environment actually goes away, it's so vital that we locate the stability within ourselves and that we are becoming attuned to change, learn how to follow its signals. And as I say, dance with change as it emerges.
Yes. Yes. Dance with change. So,
I love
that,
that. That
yeah.
was beautiful. That's such a beautiful share, right, Cecily?
Yeah. And
And
Ashish, tell me, like, how does that, when you hear that and you think about the work that you're doing now and that you've transitioned to, and you think about the epoch and the eras that are changing, what is that? How do you relate that
yeah,
to your work?
well, I mean, first of all, I think that what's beautiful is, Cecily, I could hear myself speak. I think we're speaking from the same root perspective. Around, the two or three big messages you said, right? The first is, one is change is the only constant. In fact, what I often say is I think the pace of change has never been faster, right? In terms of the impact, the scale of it. But change is a constant. And yet so many people want to learn how to navigate change. You're changing. You change your entire cells in your body once every 3 months. We literally are changing every minute. Cells are birthing and cells are dying. Thoughts are forming. Thoughts are, individually we're changing. We experience seasons. So the seasons are changing and the world is changing. And yet somehow, when we look at it from our egoic structures, we think we've changed a lot in the past. We're not going to change in the future. And I think that's at the heart of the suffering. So I think I love this notion of impermanence and constant change and cyclicality, the universal cyclicality, right, that you talked about, Cecily. And I
Yeah.
think it's important because step number one, right, if we want to navigate and not be afraid of, we have to recognize that, we can't be afraid of something that is a fact.
Yeah.
Right? We can't hold on to something when there is nothing to hold on to. You are not the same, and neither is what's around you. So I think that's number one. I think the second big piece is the only choice we have, and I love where you ended, Cecily. The only choice we have is from what place do you navigate? You can navigate this change from a place of fear and control and power, or you can navigate it from a place of connectedness, recognizing the interbeing that we have with everything, and to truly dance through it, right? To really surrender and to kind of move and accept and make the most of. And that's actually not just a fundamental shift for most people in their root perspective. Fundamentally, it's a choice to grow and elevate our own consciousness.
Right. And
Um,
it's not the first place we go though, as things get more into the cycle that Cecily, you say, we call disorder. Um, and it's a it's how do I say this? We don't I immediately say, wow, I've got to go internal and attune when everything around me is changing, at a more rapid pace than we've seen in our lifetime because of the
yes.
cycles. And so, what is that? That keeps us from going there, and what's our role? As the work that we're doing in the world to help people get there. Because it's not the first thing they think of. It's actually like, wait, I'm not even know if we have the time or the budget to really, attune to ourselves.
Well, I think I'll tell you, look, I think the reason I shifted into this was the thesis of the first book that I wrote, right? The Hardwired for Happiness, which is this notion, that is not the place where we go. That's not the
Hmm.
place we go because most of us experience the world, you can call it from a place of ego, right? And if you
Yeah.
think about our brains, which are wired for fear, not joy, we are constantly seeking safety and security.
Right.
And a change fundamentally threatens our way of being, our identity, what it means, and for everything else around. So from that place, our learned millions of years, like this is not just lived 20, 30, 40, 50 years of this life, but millions of years how our brains have evolved, we are wired for a fight, flight, freeze response. And that's the place where we go. We try and control, we try and either fight it, or we run away from it, or we just freeze, right? And so fundamentally, we have to help people recognize that about themselves. And then we have to help them rewire these millions of years of programming
Hmm.
away from fear, scarcity, and so much focus on ourself to purpose, our bigger why. Because in constant change, the only thing you need to ground and your North Star is what's the bigger why. We have to recognize that we are fundamentally an interbeing and we don't control 90% of it, right? Or if not 99%. And there is so much that is out there rather than just holding on to what we have.
Right. Exactly.
So,
And so I would say, so Cecily, listening to what Ashish just said about kind of this internal, this purpose, when people bring you in, a futurist, and they're not necessarily bringing you in to predict the future. Correct?
Sometimes they think they are, but that's
Yeah.
not what I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Um,
what's really happening? Because you talked to too about we've got to attune into something bigger than ourselves. We've got to shift, like as she said, from this hardwired place of fear into this bigger thing of purpose. How would you how would you say that in the work
well,
that
I
you
do
do?
also promote a similar idea. However, I feel along with that, first of all, my big mission is to scale and spread what I refer to as change literacy.
Hmm.
Change is governed by universal laws and forces. And when we begin to understand it, we can watch it and we can anticipate it.
Yeah.
So it is not only the interbeing because we still have to navigate a craziness that's outside of us. But if we know how to watch it and begin to see it as its own unfolding and to track the signals of change, then we can align ourselves with it better. So, one of my phrases is, the future is not figureoutable. It is followable. And in fact, it is only followable. So a lot of my training, I do a lot of leadership development in this, lead like a futurist, using foresight principles that apply to this inner work, in this work, is that they are being trained in not only what to follow from that inside sense of purpose, and how it is leading you through the thread of your own unfolding in this spiral pattern, but also in doing that in the way that we scan the world for the types of changes that are emerging and make sense of them. Because I think the sense making part is where we gain a lot of stability. It helps bring the anxiety down and the agency up. And that's critical. So as those two things are happening, we now can engage this why. We can now trust the sense of what's leading us forward, this inner life force, which we also name as our purpose, because that life force is always telling us that if we listen to it, we are on our path no matter what happens in the world.
Yeah. And
But attuned to the change and aligned with the changes. So the change literacy, I think, is very critical.
Yeah. And I want to talk a little bit about that, because I think all three of us, and maybe we use different words, different essence, but we're coming back to the same thing, is that we connect. Like I say, when we heal ourselves, we will heal these systems. And so when we attune to ourselves and we attune to the system around us, then we are finding our path. Which do you think, is there one that's harder for people than the other? Is it more the balance of both, of like, how do I trust myself and how do I see what's going on in the system? Both of you have and do work in this world of the both and, the self and the system. Talk a little bit about how people understand, like, how do we attune to both of those and bring them together?
Yeah. Well, I can go, and Cecily, I would invite your perspective on this. Look, here's for your listeners a little experiment that I want you to think about, right? The answer to that question, your question of the inside versus the outside.
Yeah.
And it's a simple question, right? Which is, if you're watching this on YouTube or if you're listening to this on audio, this is the question I want you to think about. If you're on YouTube, I want to ask you a question. Where do you see the three of us right now? And if you're hearing it, where are you hearing us right now? Where are we? Now, if you're listening to us or watching us on YouTube, you might say, well, I'm watching you on my computer, on my iPhone, on my iPad. I see you on the screen. I'm going to ask you again, where are you really seeing us right now? Right? And you're like, that's an odd question. You guys are in a riverside somewhere. Again, where are you seeing us right now? And if you go back to the basics of when we first learned the science of sight, you recognize where you're really seeing is a little image of us being formed at the back of your head. It's inverted upside down. It's really small, that your brain is interpreting that signal as the three of us. Because you've tuned in and you know it's Renelle and Cecily and Ashish, you kind of associate these forms with us. Because we're speaking in English, a language you learned along the way, that your brain knows what the way to interpret it, you can understand us. Somebody who doesn't know the language would not make any sense of the words coming out of my mouth. It'll just be noise, right? So think about this. When you see us, you are seeing us within you. It's a projection. When you hear us, you're hearing us within you. You are making sense of the words we're saying through your sense of beliefs and stories about who we are and our experiences and why what we are saying you might give more resonance to than somebody on the street just shouting in tattered clothes because you think they are crazy. So we are sense-making people, but we always sense-make from within. Anais Nin said it best, without the science. We see the world as we are, not as the world is. quantum physicists know the act of observing changes the point that you observe. And so I think it's a little bit of a question where the reason I go down this path is I say, we think about the outside and the inside being separate when they are fundamentally interweaved. And if we really want to be able to see things the way they are, the only way we can is to actually invite different perspectives and also recognize that our act of observation is actually changing things. And so it's a place of that surrender. So I feel, I think you have to start within and fundamentally become more curious about our own sense making to be able to witness the wonders and the magic of what's unfurling outside and to embrace it rather than be in terror because, oh my God, what's happening around us?
Yeah, great point. Great point. Cecily, what would you add to that?
Yeah, a couple of things. We go back to this cycle of reinvention, which is, change is life, life is change. And it always does carry these energies of kind of combustion and polarity. And that's part of it as well. So there are two things that I will add to that. One is when you really begin to, what I teach is to speak spiralese and see spiralese. You begin to recognize there are 4 phases of where you are emerging or maybe in a phase of expiration in this cycle. The same thing is you can begin to observe it in relationships and organizations, projects, societies. So this sense of where is something in its process, what's expiring and what's emerging is part of what we are sensing when we look out at the world. Underneath that spiral graphically are 2 dimensions, 2 axes of being that I talk about. And what Ashish was just referring to is what happens in the vertical axis of space, the spacious part of where all things are connected, all energies are infinite. And it's where we go to feel what matters, to discover truth, to find our stability, to recognize we're connected, all of those things. The horizontal axis, which is the axis of time, is the one that has us live in this world where time and all of our activities feel finite, are measured, binary, and so forth. And so one of the things that I do in my trainings is that we are learning how to hinge between the vertical and the horizontal many times a day, because we need to go up to get this perspective and find out what matters in order to come into the horizontal to materialize it and to be on the ground in this human world, this body, this moment in time to do our work. And that has to be a very skillful, literate, intentional practice. So most people, and especially leaders these days, are overwhelmed. Their plates are too full. And, in fact, I've never seen them. They have loads that are in fact impossible. And it's worse than ever in that way. And, I assert that leaders don't need more time. We just need more space.
Yeah.
And so space is not a function of time. Space is a time of altitude. And that there are, I'll leave you here. I teach 4 ahs that get us into the vertical, like in a moment. And the first awe is that of wonder, which, when we taste our coffee in the morning or look out the window and see the clouds, we can engage awe in any moment and again, get spaciousness in our being.
Yeah.
We also have the awe of empathy, which we go, oh. And in that moment, we melt and we are returned to ourselves and into that connection. Stories do that, connection with who's with us. It's what makes us, laugh and smile and do all the things as we're listening to music. That these are ways that we hack into the vertical. There's also the awe of, aha, I've never seen that before. And it's that worldview starts to shift because in the brain, associatively, things have come together and indeed you haven't seen it that way. And now more is possible and we get excited or we have understanding and sense making. And the last awe is the one of, we move into humor to, again, come into the spaciousness. And we can, I'd like to maybe piggyback on what Ashish was saying, is we don't have much control ever. And as far as I can tell, the only thing that we can control is in the agency of where we put our attention.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we can choose to put our attention through these sweet little hacks to go up into the vertical, get perspective, and then come back down in the moment that's needed. Or to suspend all of the demands of the day and, in fact, just take it in as data and reflect on it later rather than feeling we have to respond in the moment.
And one thing I want to add to that is as you're talking about the Oz, you see the prayer flags behind me. Those are from Nepal. And a colleague and I we're putting a leadership transformation trip together in Nepal because of the we believe that leaders need to get space, and utilizing somewhere like Nepal that we've both been creates the exact space that you're talking about. And the hardest part of getting people to go on this trek is time.
Right.
And what we're trying to get them is the space, and bring that back and learn that from the Himalaya, learn that from the Sherpa people. And so I love that, how we have to really play with that access. You've got to separate time from awe and time from space, and how important space is. So that is brings a smile to my face of how important this is. The other thing I wanted to ask both of you is, we're talking about how we attune both inner and outer to this world. I'm also curious to help people understand the need for the disorder and the rebirth, because it is the cycles of nature as well, right? We have this every day. We have the seasons. Sometimes we have major natural disasters that feel like disasters, but they're causing rebirth. Certain fires are the only way we can get certain trees to regenerate, et cetera. And so, from a societal perspective, if every 80 to 100 years we come into something that we refer to as disorder, why do we need this? It makes sense in nature. Why does it make sense in society?
Well, I think, Renelle, I'll have Cecilia answer that. I'll give you mine. But I wanted to, just before we even go there, we talk about inner outer. I think there is also, Cecilia, you're talking about vertically, right? Like it's going above. It's, you'd call it subject object, you'll call it balcony dance floor. At McKinsey, my colleagues who research, and they call it dual awareness of yourself. And like, it's, from a place of connectedness, being able to space. Playfully, I might invite Cecily. I loved your 4 R's, right? Wonder, when the insight, empathy. I love those. I have one more, awe. By the way, it's a word that shows up actually in all spiritual traditions. In Hinduism texts and others, it's Om. It's the word, the start, of the word Om. Right? In Islam, it's Amin. Again, it starts with an A. In Christianity, it's Amen or Amin.
Yeah.
And is the beginning, middle, and end. And I do think that fifth, if we want, right? I personally find I always in the morning chant Om. And if you chant Om and you can see your vibration and fundamentally interconnection, right? You get to that place of stillness. You talked about, time feels fast when you are triggered, because you're literally trying to like either run away or away. And one of the ways in which we can find that place of oneness and interconnectedness, and hence from that place of calmness, because we can't be afraid of ourselves when we feel, we're afraid of the other, right? So that would be one more fifth, Cecily, if I may
love
be
it.
so
The
bold.
5 Oz.
of the Oz that are present, that are present for me. Look, I think the question of why do we need change? The nature might need it, but why do we
And
need it?
specifically this big 80 to 100-year disorder. I mean, I think a lot of people are asking that haven't lived through this because it is usually only one lifetime that you see it.
Well, I think I'll just answer it this way. I think fundamentally the people who ask that question, I think we're today, and we're living more and more in a world where we are disconnected from the world. We talk about nature because we think we are not nature. We talk about these big cycles of things happening to us. That's really the question. The question, what they're really asking is, why is this happening to me?
Yep.
Right? They're not asking the question, why is this what is going on? Because the reality is, look, take your consciousness. There's a particular meditation that I created that I do in the mornings, which is you start with the smallest part of where you can focus your energy, right? Your attention. It might be where the point where the air touches your nostril when you breathe in and you breathe out. And slowly from that specific space of concentration, if you expand it to your nose, your face, your body, the room, the house, the city, the street, the city, the state, the country, the world, the planet, the sun, the solar system, other solar systems, what do you realize? Things are constantly changing. There is nothing static. The only thing that's static is in this world, this fixed sense of me. And so when we go through with Cecily, you're talking about these massive changes, we're like, oh my God, why is this happening to me? I think that's the root of that question, right? And I think if we are able to disassociate from that, if you're able to disconnect from this sense of self to a fundamental state, I think those questions are invitations for what is looking to emerge, what can I learn from this, and how can I contribute?
Yes.
What is my contribution right now in this? How is this for my growth? How is this for the growth of the world we've created, right? That's the question I think if we can turn into, then we don't ask that question because we don't ask that of anything else.
Right. I love that. What is looking to emerge? Cecily, what would you ask to that? What is looking to emerge?
What is looking to emerge? Well, if we go back to the universal spiral, and it does, why is this needed? It's not that it's needed. It's just what it does. And
It just
so
what
it
it
is, no form. It's movement, right? So we move through different formations, which we attach to as solid, and they are not. And so they go through phases of emergence and kind of generation. And just think about in our own lives, when we're going into a period of transition, we're trying things on for a while. It's like, oh, it's a little bit like this. And, it's what I refer to. Are you my mother? Are you my mother? You're trying things on. At some point, it feels like a new chapter is emerging. And I can hear in both of your stories, and I've experienced it in my own life. We've had several chapters. And that period of transition is one of emergence. And then a new form comes to be in which you're now an author and doing the happiness squad. And there's kind of mastery in it. And it feels good and it's fantastic. And at some point, there will come a time when it feels like it no longer holds us. Our growth is no longer in that form and it wants to bust out. Energy does that. And we go through recognition of, and this happens societally, of when things are in their phase of expiration, it's not quite working, is it? And then there's ultimately a reckoning. And, cosmically, we have a beautiful example of the Big Bang. Those energies come and combust.
Yeah.
And, or World War II explodes. And, we can go back 80, 100-year cycles and see every single time that's what's happening. So it's more about this is what's so. And we're not in charge. One of the things that happens when we have periods of relative stability is that we like to think we figured it out. and that we haven't answered. So
So
when we're
true.
in that time of mastery, or when we're in that time of societal relative stability, we think we've gotten the answer and we're upset. And I personally, I think that level of hubris is a part of the problem.
Yeah.
And so while it's not necessary, it is what happens, is that we are kind of forced in a kind of humbling of we have to sort it out all over again. And so one of the things that I will remind myself when I'm feeling down is that down is in the vertical dimension and it takes me to new depths. So what are we accessing when things are hard? We are asked to rise, and we find a deeper resource that we would never dig into if we didn't have to. And boy, do we have to. And boy, will we have to. So we have to, find again this way of resourcing ourselves, accepting change, flowing with it in order to not only manage our own growth as we expand in our capacity to hold it all. My background is in Buddhism and for over 30 years. And the translation that I love of the core principles is, our job in life is to accept reality just as it is,
Yeah.
without argument. There's nothing wrong here. There's hardship, there's suffering, but there's nothing that we can fix. We need to attend to some things.
Yeah.
So our job is to accept life just as it is, which is wisdom, and then have a heart big enough to hold it all.
Yeah.
How can we accept all of the hardship as well as all of the beauty, all of the challenge as well as all of the strength? How do we begin to continue to expand our spaciousness, our capacity for the best of ourselves? And challenge, hardship will make us do that. We
I
have
love that
to.
yes, I love that you say that. Yesterday, I was out meeting with some people about the work. And I would say, yes, my path the last 5 years has endured some interesting external challenges, right? That have really had me dig deep. And somebody was saying to me, like, just the way that we do our work today is changing. I was like, absolutely. And then I had the fortune of having lunch with one of my mentors after that. And we talked about what is next for the work that we're doing. And we talked about, like, can people actually sign up to work with us because of the capacity we have to hold things with them and hold the unknown? Could they sign a contract with us, not totally knowing what the contract is, but trusting in that because that's part of where we're going? And then he also asked me, all the things that you've been through in the last 5 years, would you have made some of the transformation that you've made without that? And I was like, probably not. I can't guarantee that, but probably not. And so as we conclude today, I would say we've talked about some very complex things that are actually pretty simple, right? Some of the simplest things feel the hardest. And so as we continue to do our inner work and help other people, help the companies that we help and the leaders that we help do their work, um, what can the people that may be listening today, what would you leave them with?
Cecily.
Kind of keeping to the simple amid the complex is I like to just boil things down to what can we really sense forward.
Yeah.
And, going back to my phrase, the future is not figureoutable. We often get paralyzed thinking that we can somehow figure it out before we move, but instead it is only followable. And the things that you're following are as simple as what I refer to as just how you doing. Follow the things where you feel your aliveness, or you feel a pull, or you feel intrigue, where something is alive in you and you show up well. And, pay attention to the things that are not quite there. Make some choices about what you need to negotiate with reality about and do so. And anything that's not really working for you to the degree that your life can manage it, it's time to do that. But I live that way really around. It's just my job is simply to collect my thumbs ups. Yeah. People, experience, clients, work, environments, exchanges like that. And to follow the like that's in life. That's one of the ways that you can find your compass.
Thank you. Ashish?
I was looking up, look, I think there is a lot of, right now, there's a lot of people in deer in headlights. There's a lot of people completely changing because of the change that is unfolding in the external world right now, right? With the new administration, et cetera, et cetera. And, I really, for me, I think there are two big things that, I think it's a message for all the people, Renelle, people like you, me, and others who are doing this work. But I think it's really a message for others, especially for us. There's a lot of people who are fighting that change because somehow that change is wrong and it's not right. And again, right, Cecily, you said it beautifully. It's in the wisdom. It just is. So step number one, stop fighting it. It just is. Right? Because there is this emotional drama they went through that actually robs us of our power. And my second big point, right, is regardless of that, I think we can't change the external world. It's too complex. We never could. You can't even change. I have a 14-year-old teenager. I'm very keenly aware every day, every day, every night, every evening. I'm reminded I have zero shot at changing anything. Right? Nothing, right? It keeps me humble, keeps me learning, keeps me grounded. But I do think there is one choice that we have. Mahatma Gandhi said it, be the change you want to see in the world. And Viktor Frankl, another one of my favorite teachers, right, that I've learned so much from, in his beautiful words that said, everything, look, you might feel helpless. You might feel like all of a sudden you've lost your footing, right? Everything seems, the rug, quote unquote. I've heard these words. I'm just repeating all the words. The rug's been pulled out. What are we going to do? I am like literally fighting for survival right now. And he said this beautifully. Everything can be taken from man, but one thing. The last of the human freedoms. To choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. To choose one's own way. Spirals are a fact of life. Spirals are just that. And I think we can choose, regardless of the up or the down, we can choose the attitude with which we can go. We can take on an anti-learning mindset or an attitude of fight, or we can adopt a learning mindset to say what is looking to emerge, what can I learn, how can I make a difference? That's my invitation.
Thank you. Thank you both. The other day, I posted something on LinkedIn about no policy, no problem, meaning that as we move some of these things inside of us, this is what we call conscious leadership, right? In some respects, it doesn't matter what's happening outside of us because we've moved the policies and procedures that we needed externally. We moved them internal. And that's like the meaning. No one can take that from us amidst all the change around us. So thank you both so much. I think we could do 3 more shows on this, but I hope that for our listeners that this gives you some pieces of, 1, you're not alone. 2, find the simplicity and the complexity, follow the life force, and be with what is. I know much easier said than done. Just this is life. This is life. Thank you both so much. I will definitely put in the show notes how to find each of you and your brilliant work. And thank you for inspiring me and helping us shift through this changing world.
Yeah, pleasure to be with both of you. Thank you, Renelle.
Thank you for having us. And Cecily, so enjoyed hearing from you. I've taken down the 4 R's. The 5. Exactly.
Oh, we have 5 now. Yes.
We just created the co-created one. There we go. No,
Right.
thank you. And Renelle, thank you, my dear friend. Such a joy to know you and honored to be on this conversation with Cecily and you.
For more information, visit insight-cc.com or email us at info@insight-cc.com. We look forward to hearing from you.